Hello out there, and welcome to the No Shit Cast. I'm your host, Matt Frazier. Two guests tonight, ladies and gentlemen. Shifu, Ramon Careaga from Blue Lotus Health and Acupuncture is joining us. And Jeff Cote, the Occidental Taoist, will be helping me in the hot seat tonight. So, Shifu, how you doing this evening?
I'm doing pretty well. Good to be back. Good to see you guys.
Jeff, welcome back to the show, sir.
Thank you very much, Matt. It's good to, I mean, we've had online, brief interactions and with Ramon, and I have anyways, and it's been amazing. Just a little bit of being able to watch his work as he was been writing it and evolving with it, and it fascinates me, and that's why I originally mentioned him to you, Matt. So I just want to first extend my appreciation, Ramon, for you coming and joining us, and you, Matt, for inviting me to be part of this conversation, because in my own path, Ramon and I have had some cross experiences, and I'm kind of a fanboy when I encounter people that I think have really deeply delved into the practices that I'm jazzed about and that I've delved into. And so it's just such an honor and a treasure for me to just be able to have a conversation with somebody who has some real, depth of knowledge and a different kind of experience than I, because it just broadens my own perspective and my own understanding. So thanks.
Oh, you're welcome. I'll pay you later.
Wow.
Say that out loud.
Oh, well, dang, we're on the air.
Excellent. That is so good. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah, we're gonna get along great.
So Ramon, you last time you were on the show, we kind of did more of a meet and greet, who, what, when, where, why, about you, sort of your history and things like that. And we had discussed having you back on to kind of come in and go into more detail some of the things that you've been working on and doing research on. And obviously coming recommended by Jeff. Thank you so much, Jeff, to begin with, because that was a really, really excellent podcast. I thought it would be really great to get you guys together to kind of and give you this platform to sort of go in more detail on some of these works that you're working on.
Sure. Well, I'm certainly glad to add. I think Jeff. I guess both of you, you're part of the Mists of Time group, right?
Yeah, that's correct. Yep.
Yeah, right. So you see most of my work, probably at the moment, seems to be focused on the Western science, refuting some of the mistaken understandings of physics, and looking at human history from a much wider perspective, talking about the validity of human testimony of Native American, Aboriginal, ancient Egyptian, Sumerian testimony for, our human cosmogony. But in the background, I'm still working on the Eastern sciences and looking for ways to actually bridge them, because it's one thing to have to call it complementary and alternative medicine, where, you do some Western medicine and then maybe you give massage and maybe you use oils. It's another thing to actually bridge the sciences, because they are so different, and it's like somehow finding a way to bridge pie and cake. And I love pie and I love cake. I happen to like pie more, but I'm not going to choose one or the other forever, and to the detraction of myself to not explore. It's sort of like this archery. The new Robin Hood movie is coming out, and they did a consulting with Lars Anderson for the speed shooting, and there was this guy, and he was arguing about how it's not traditional and it's a slap in the face to real archery. And I said, man, you're self-limiting. You can have both. You can do traditional long shot archery, recurve, compound bow, and have speed archery and trick shots. It's in the text. It was useful just because you're not going to pull off those shots with a 100-pound bow. Doesn't mean that it couldn't be used in the field of battle. So, I have a very expansive, syncretic approach to things, and when I set about doing this experiment, it was because of the electric universe paradigm, and it was my interest in a particular hypothesis. But then I stepped forward and I did it with Chinese medicine, and there's valid electromagnetic, but especially electrical relationships going on, and that's what my work is showing. And some of the results are just fantastic. The effect on delta pain values, like change in pain reporting before and after treatment, being correlated possibly with the solar wind density, which is protons, but especially in the moving averages moving together through most of the moon phase. But then as the moon approaches full or new moon, suddenly that relationship flip-flops. Instead of the moving averages following each other, then suddenly now they approach each other. So, and I have to do a whole separate trial just to verify that. But those kinds of results really excite me. I mean, I'm moving towards my goal of creating a GRI, an actual machine that is usable on the fly and is more valuable in clinic than an MRI. That's my goal.
So I gotta, if you don't mind, can I interject?
Go ahead. Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm going to take you back, 1995. I was in school for Asian medicine after having been an aerospace tech. And the first thing that crossed my mind as I was learning Chinese medicine was, man, there has to be a way to be able to chart how the planetary forces and the magnetic and electromagnetic interactions happen with the planet and how that affects the physiology of the body. I remember, like, in a lecture thinking these exact thoughts and just going, wow, I wonder how that would be accomplished. And knowing that I have it with the engineering background, but not the physics and the astrophysics background, would not ever be the person who could work on something like that. And nor was I really drawn towards that, because I was really moving away from engineering at that point. I was really discovering how much of more of an artist and a poet and a musician and just a dreamer from the dreaming side of consciousness that I was coming, in like my heart. And while I was very appreciative for all the engineering training and the ways of thinking it gave me, and helped me to really focus my intellect in the reasoning capacity of my mind in a functional way, that I could never accomplish that, but I really wished that somebody could, and that one day I would meet a person who could do that. And so I got to tell you, the thing you just said to me, or that you said to us, has me very excited. One, two, just realizing that I saw that possibility back then and was just waiting for that a person to come along and do it. So I want to say that's kind of where I thought you were going in all the things you've been writing. I kind of thought you might be heading in that direction. So it excites me tremendously.
Yeah, well, it's quite a journey to go from electrical. I share that with you, to go from a Western background and then to switch completely the gears into an intuitive, very, I quote, right-brained way of being. But I've always tried to maintain really both, and it doesn't always come across like, when I'm writing about the Ferris wheels and Dionysius, and or if I'm writing about Atlantis, it doesn't seem to be related, but in my mind, it's all related, because, for example, in the Ferris wheels, we created these amusement parks almost immediately. I mean, it's within the decade after discovering electromagnetism. So as soon as we have the true force, we start celebrating by writing these rides that are all shaped after cosmic motifs: the cosmic mountain, the cosmic pillar, the floating island. We even have this obsession with
the wheel of the year.
Yeah, the wheels. We have this obsession with putting children on top of dragons, and this is all related to our explosion in electromagnetism. And if you think about it too, the beginning of the scientific period, you can of course give a lot of credit for mathematics and for Darwin, but it was where the money is. The big money has always been related to electromagnetism, starting with Benjamin Franklin on forward. Electromagnetism has powered literally our entire society, our way of being. And I am just enamored of the possibility of finding. Of course, I'm going to be writing soon after I get through a couple of these medical papers. I'm going to be writing about bioenergy and electricity as part of the EPMC. I say my only because I'm the guy who said EPMC, but it's really for everyone. And when I created a paper to invite people to switch from Big Bang cosmology to electroplasma cosmology, but with the extended aspect, because the extension is what enables you to do other things. The extension is what enables you to talk about the Giza power plant, or to talk about King Arthur not in England or traveling around, and then connect that, because it is connected, believe it or not. The King Arthur crossing the Atlantic Ocean is connected to the electric universe cosmology via the comet that was recorded on Welsh tablets. So there's a cosmology that is available to people that will tie almost everything together. Obviously, there are going to be some things, they're going to want to talk about Picasso or something, and maybe it's not directly related, but it seems to me it's the most Taoist thing that we can do is reduce the equation and follow Occam's razor till we come to a more simple way of being, and then maybe we can even heal from the cataclysms and start behaving a little bit more coherently and more ethically with each other, while retaining, hopefully, our individuality and not becoming a hive mind. But that's my goal. If I can create a medical device that changes the clinical experience to where, because it's really great when you have a treasure like Jeff or Master Josh Painter. If you have people like this for a practitioner, that is amazing. But we're having a shortage of doctors. This is not actually a big secret. They're pushing nurses into nurse practitioners because we don't have enough general practitioners. So we need to use technology to help more people more quickly. And if a person can run a lab with these devices that show them the energetic problem without them having to interact one-on-one, I think there will always be a value for one-on-one. But of course, as a capitalist, I would want a person like Jeff to be paid quite well for that one-on-one session. And then when he's if he's helping 20 people at a time, to have technology that's going to help him. And as I like to say, acupuncture it's state of the art, but it's totally obsolete. A lot of the things that we hold, our entire paradigm, if you're into crystals and crystal healing, the paradigm, there are some Europeans that are working on like a new version of crystal therapy, but pretty much it's all very traditional. It's oral tradition, and there are some books, but we need to get to the next level. There need to be these crystals inside of machines, and you flip on the switch and it's putting out energy signatures that are doing things for you. I mean, I want to be able to create some type of field, just like with Fa Chi, you emit the Chi and you push the energy out, or you pull the energy out. I would like to create a machine that actually did that for people, because I can't needle inside the center of their brain, and I can't needle into their ovaries.
Right.
So we've spent trillions on. I covered this in my investments in Ragnarok. We've spent trillions on the nuclear program. It's about time that we spend billions and trillions on the technologies that the ancients discovered, such as the changes, the yin and yang, all the properties of yin and yang, and how they interact with each other. I mean, think about how many people are suffering in their marriage because of money, and what they're not really realizing is that underneath of the discussion, there are multiple layers of problems that all relate to basically yin yang and five phase or five element correspondences.
Yeah.
And they're I mean, for example, I did my own Bazi when I first started learning Bazi, which is the Chinese astrology is based on time rather than on the planets alone.
Right.
And I discovered I had a spouse clash in my chart. So that means that like every time I'm having trouble communicating with my wife, I need to first look at myself, and I need to understand, what is it that's causing me to clash. So it can help me to deal with that situation a little bit better. We have vast amounts of those kinds of issues that because we're not going back to the era of guru disciple living, it's not going to be like Jesus and the 12 disciples again.
No, that's not actually ideal, anyways. That gets into the authoritarian hierarchy and all that. And that's I think that our consciousness has moved past a point where that's where I think we need to not be doing that sort of thing. I think that I watch millennials and younger even. And I observe the way they collaborate in ways that my generation, I'm Generation X. I'm just a couple of years off of being a baby boomer, to be honest. Don't spread that around.
Okay, we won't.
And I can see that there is a very different way of orienting to problems and to problem solving, and to like culturally interacting, and there's less of a desire from those generations to participate in hierarchical structures, but also they're breaking them apart, and I think that's ultimately a very good thing. But that took me off of where I really wanted to go, which we're going to do this a lot. One of the things I wanted to say to you, Ramon, is have you ever read Dr. Valerie Hunt and any of her work with how the fascia and her work? She's a neurophysiologist and was the director of study at Berkeley and research at Berkeley. And what she researched was the biomagnetic field and how we generate that. And she worked with shaman and qigong masters and yogis and all that, just to map them out and see what they were doing and what was common and what wasn't, and psychics as well. And she really came up with some fantastic information. She's got some great science that in her book that I think that you would understand better than anybody else I've talked to so far. Including myself.
Yeah, I was gonna say. So Jeff's basically saying, "Can you read it and tell me?"
Yeah, no.
I get the science and everything, at least on a basic level, and I got the theory. But I think that with where you're going, that if you haven't looked at her stuff, I highly recommend you look at it because it's probably going to shortcut a lot of stuff for you.
Yeah, well, basically, here's the way my process goes. When I have, of course, I follow the intuition, I follow the spirit.
Yeah.
And I have a whole queue of papers that will be coming up, and the bioenergy is coming. I can feel, that one coming near. And when that happens, I go through and I write, and then I pull up the research, and then when I do that, it fuels more into. So what happens is I think of it like playing Zelda. I unlock mystery levels, and the more mystery levels I unlock, the more I feel like I'm on the right track. And when it stops unlocking, I assume that I've either gotten off track or I've reached the end of this tunnel, this maze journey, and then I meander over into a new thing. Because for me, the mysteries, searching out the mysteries, is quite the key. So I have heard of her, and I have heard of her work, and I'm familiar that she basically was totally reaffirming the Chinese concepts of the tendinomuscular meridians or sinew channels and of the Sanjiao organ. For people who are not aware, the new largest organ of the body is not the skin, but it's the connective tissue. And the connective tissue could mean fascia. It could mean the fibrinogen inside of cells. And the Chinese conceptualized this via looking at they called it the triple burner. And so it did mean the upper, middle, and the bottom, but it also meant an entire it's a fire organ, but it's kind of a watery organ, and it has to be wet. And they've done through actual micro scanning. There's a video people can watch called "Strolling Under the Skin," and they get small enough and they see the actual water drops. And here's the fascinating thing: so we're used to thinking of sinews and ligaments as stretching like rubber bands, which is ironic because I'm holding one right now. But actually, when you look at these connective tissues, the way they deform is nonlinear. It's totally fractal, and they all look like black, what do they call those? The black widow spider webs. But when they stretch and deform, they reshape spontaneously and on the fly. And they've got video of that now happening. And when you get unhealthy in the fascia and the connective tissue between layers, say between the dermis and the muscle, those tend to bunch up and form little balls. They become desiccated, yellow. And this, of course, in the Chinese medicine, we call this sha, which means sand. But there's probably an entire realm, because when I went to school, they taught us, they just were like, here's gua sha, here's what it does. And, you get like one class on gua sha. Well, what I found clinically is there's lots of different kinds of sha. There's lots of different kinds of results that can come from cupping and scraping that indicate there are complex processes happening down on that level. And I'm sure I don't know if we'll ever get to the quantum or even the cellular level on the fly, but there are results that we need to see during treatment that could completely revolutionize not just sports medicine, but just in general family practice medicine. Things like could latent heat pathogens be related to ADHD, and what is the long-term effect of not releasing the latent heat or the SHA inside of a child who has ADHD? Does it tend them towards certain pathways, like towards violence or towards depression or towards suicide or towards bullying or towards success even? Is it related to autism? There are so many unanswered questions that are going to ultimately only come to us from a energetic approach to understanding the body. This mechanical approach, the mechanical body is necessary. The mechanical body keeps the energetic body going. It keeps it alive. We rely on it for movement, eating, everything. But this mechanical only approach is literally killing our species. It's something that has to go as we embrace a greater paradigm.
Totally.
This kind of reminds me, Jeff, of one of the stories that you had told me about. I think it was a Tai Chi master that they put inside like a copper dome, and
copper wall test. Yeah.
Okay, so there's some coalescence here where there's definite, and we know that there's a magnetic fields. I can take a volt-o-meter and stick it on your muscles and measure. As you flex your muscle and stuff like that, right? So, what is it though about medicine that it never tried to find that there was a connection between the electrical impulses and energies in the human body and some sort of diagnostic methodology? Because that doesn't seem to exist, right?
I'll tell you, I was actually writing on that today. I think that electric fields, that they missed the boat with electric fields because electricity is inherently a bit more mathematically complicated. And there's some cultural milieu surrounding, when you have certain professors get famous, and when they get famous, they get more students, and those students are more vocal, and they're going to pass on. So, things like gravity, Big Bang, magnetohydrodynamics, those things have followers. Whereas, plasma physics and to a certain extent, even quantum electrodynamics, when I went through electrical engineering school, nobody mentioned a wink about quantum electrodynamics. Although Feynman was quite popular, but it's just something that we didn't go through. And even with Feynman, he was limited to doing one-dimensional electrical work. He had 3 dimensions for the magnetism because of the work of Hannes Alfvén, but he just didn't have supercomputers, so he had to approach it in a way that could be done on paper or very simple computing. And now we're at a point where we can do so much more with electricity modeling than we could at that time.
I think that there's an element in here too, like you talk about like their pet theories and people, all that as well. I think that there's an element too of, being able to conceptualize some of what we're talking about requires a certain measure of ability to have abstract thinking, to get outside the box of mechanism. Mechanism is actually pretty easy to understand, and it's not. I'm not saying that people aren't smart enough. What I'm saying is, the unknown space, the place of not knowing, is very uncomfortable to people. And my observation has been that people will avoid feeling like they're floating in a not knowing. That is that's so scary that they'll funnel their activities into the realm where they feel most confident and competent. Whereas anytime we're going to broach into territory,
that's if the only tool in your toolbox is a hammer, the world's a
everything's
nail.
a nail.
So you're
yeah.
you're kind of to that point.
I think Jeff, you would agree though. That's only because they haven't encountered the mystery schools in a way that I guess, quote, to make it easy, it makes it fun, because like Taoism, like people, when you meet people, you say, have you know anything about Taoism? Well, I read the Tao Te Ching or something, and I go, well, you don't have any answers now. You have a lot of questions, because that book has almost nothing but questions and mysteries. And if people, if they could get into that mode of thinking, I think that they would find mystery and the unknown to be a lot more exciting or even less frightening. So they don't have to cling to a previous limitation. Is that your experience with teaching, Taoism and Tai Chi?
Yeah, it's funny. I think people end up into it in spite of their resistance. It's interesting because I have the unique perspective of that I teach a lot of seniors. And not that I'm certainly the only one. I'm certainly not the only one doing that, but that is what I encounter a lot, and I present the Taoist paradoxes as exactly what they are. As look, these are vectors for power. Anytime you have a paradox, the resolution of that paradox is a route to some kind of power, consciousness power, and if you can actually implement it, that resolution of the paradox, then it is an actual temporal power. And that's, people encounter the paradox, and they think that they're either A, not smart enough to get it, or they shy away from it simply because it requires that coming out of the box, the coming out of what they know, and
uncomfortable.
And uncomfortable. They want it. If they can have it presented to them in a way that is playful and has no pressure, then they begin to, I think, orient to it in a very different way. But when they're presented, and this isn't just seniors, this is humans, when we are presented with it in a way that's a challenge to our status quo, to the way we think, to our very paradigm and the way we think things operate, most people will shy away from it simply because some fundamental footing for their orientation to everything gets challenged by it. As an example, there was a gentleman who was a patient of mine for a while, and we became friends. And he was a great guy, very, very inquisitive. But when you presented him the idea of the open possibility of a genuine, what true infinity is, it literally, because he could actually imagine that to a degree, he saw the vastness of it and he shied away, and he would I don't really want to contemplate that, because he knew that at some fundamental level, to stare into the face of a genuine mystery requires you to let go of everything and anything that you hold dear, because any of it can change in a moment.
That's right.
With the new information, and people are afraid of that, and in some ways, and I don't think everybody is. I think that there, in certain ways, people. We crave it. I believe humans are made for exploration. Why do you think we do things? We explored our entire planet, and we didn't really, but we explored the surface of it, and wandered around and saw as much of it. And there's a certain spirit of adventure that we have.
Yeah,
and that's why we love myths.
For the most part, I think that explorers, for the most part, obviously there are exceptions to this, but I think for the most part, exploring and explorers and researching is a childlike quality that is inherently more positive than negative. Obviously, everything has some of both. Even I'm sure even Darwin made mistakes. who knows? We could have accidentally stepped on the one species' last egg on that island. But
Yeah.
but you know, that way he had of looking at things and with awe and penning it. You know, like James Audubon. You know, his going out and seeking, or another one. My favorite. The guy who explored all over Yosemite and Kentucky. Daggone it! It's going to kill me now. They've named trails after him everywhere. Somebody's going to write to you and say he should have said this name. But that I think is a wholly good, for the most part, as much as you can say good with a capital G, aspect of the human spirit, and it does require challenge. As the old saying goes, absolutely everything is changing, and the only thing absolute is change itself. And I find that to be marvelous. I also find the study of the changes, the I Ching, to be a great science that is incredibly helpful, that we've spent virtually zero money on. I mean, even the book sales probably pale in comparison. Like the Tao Te Ching has received, it's supposedly the second most translated book in the world. And the amount of sales for the Tao Te Ching, I tell you this, the amount of sales for the Tao of Pooh have vastly exceeded the I Ching sales. And yet the I Ching is possibly China's greatest technological gift, because it's the gift that keeps on giving. It's binary math itself. And you know, it's something, you think about this, Microsoft certainly wouldn't have lost so many hundreds of millions to billions on a phone that they just launched at the wrong time for the wrong reasons, at the wrong trajectory. And the value of understanding that, or how to get out of a situation. You think about how much money they wasted on the F-35, and if somebody had the I Ching, they could have figured out a way to basically get out of that vacuum, that torsion that is pulling them down. My central point being that the changes are the technology we haven't invested in.
Okay.
Right. But you know, the thing that he's talking about here is that, you know, and I've talked about this before. I think I talked about it with you before, that, you know, we tend to think of ourselves as living in a world of things, and that's not really true. We live in a universe of processes, and everything is a process, and it's all unfolding, and it's a web of processes all unfolding together. And that's what the I Ching actually teaches you about. Is it teaches you that there is nothing that is a thing. Everything is in a constant flux and a constant evolution of its energy and its process. When you begin to understand that process and at its fundamental level, you begin to be able to look at it and understand how to make changes in it. The I Ching is probably the oldest fully intact teachings on the mystery of how reality unfolds.
Yes, I agree.
And that is no small thing.
It isn't.
It's a huge thing.
It can touch engineering, project managing. It can touch medicine, strategy, war. It could touch politics. Everything.
Medicine, psychology, planetary evolution, the solar systems, everything. Every single element of reality.
Yes, it's 100% correct. And what people aren't let's try, Jeff, to let people in the gate here, because I think we've opened a gate here, and we're going to actually be able to suck some people in to the castle, because people will walk around the castle and they'll peek in, but they won't cross in. What if people don't know what the I Ching is? It's that thing that the restaurant's named after, ICHING. E means the changes, and Jing means classic. So it's the book of changes. And what it is actually a study of certain diagrams that ultimately come down to yin and yang, which is that is solid and broken lines. Those are just symbols of a greater thing. Now, technically speaking, everything is this unity. It's this Tao. It's this one force. But our consciousness cannot physically understand that. We're not designed that way. We haven't evolved that way. We're just not built to do that. And there's a whole myth around Pangu, because he couldn't understand it. So he's this god, and he pulls it apart into two pieces. And it's right in the beginning of Genesis. It says, let us make man in our image, and male and female he made them. So there's already the he referring to the yang unity, but then immediately the separation of the two, and it refers to this dualistic aspect. But the interplay of them, especially beyond the third level, when you get to doubling that or squaring that, becomes this gateway into understanding not just the current moment, but the quantum stream you're on. So which quantum moment you're going to activate, because there's this possibility cloud that we are experiencing going in a forward motion. We call it time, but that's just a delusional perspective of we're measuring the passage of events. And as we move through this density cloud, occasionally chaos will, jiggle it, and it'll be kind of an unexpected thing. But for the most part, we experience it in kind of a karmic manner. It's a very one thing flowing into another. But then when we look back, we go, how in the heck did I get here? Or how did I think here? What transpired to event? Or one of my favorite things that people say on the internet these days is, wow, that escalated quickly. And they're to understand the energy that lifted it from down here to up here, is such a huge thing, because we may not be able to see all the gradients, all the temperature gradients, the magnetic gradients, the gravity gradients, the social dynamic gradients. We may never develop a Google Glass that we put on our head to see those gradients. So if we can learn how to be in tune with those changes, we can fully activate our own power, which I think that power has gotten a bad rap. And I used to have a very negative association with power. And I think that we should talk about that. But we can activate our own power. We can also empower other people. We can empower other situations around us, and have a much more organic and even visceral relationship with the divine, with, if you want to say God, or with heaven, or with spirit, or the universe, to where it's an interaction, because you can knock on heaven and get answers back. It's an amazing experience to go through, and it's unfortunate that so few people really know about it.
So I'm gonna come at this just from it's gonna sound like it's coming from like out in left field possibly, but I'm gonna tangentially join in here just so you can. There's another road in here. So I during the course of my own practices and studies, I encountered Taoist dream yoga and a lot of dream work, and I began to work with dream work. And there's a parallel to these waves of change that and this idea of the web of processes in unfolding together that I got from this process, from this dreaming work. And one of those was that, when you begin to explore dreaming work extensively, the first thing that happens is you gain a measure of lucidity. And a lot of people, when they begin to gain lucidity in dream work, they begin to believe that they're the masters of their dreams, that they're in charge of their dreams, because they can control elements of the dream. But what happens if you kind of slow down and stop the young man mentality for a little while, and you step back, you begin to realize that you're taking control or taking charge of elements of the dream. But as soon as you let go of another element, it changes in its own way, and it has its own change and its own flow. And it's just very much like the web of processes of life. It's just much faster. It's a much faster series of changes, but all the changes are still present in the exact same ways that they're present in the waking consciousness and in the waking experience. And so you realize that you are not the master, that instead you realize that the dreaming and life itself, because they're just various levels of the same stuff, is a vast ocean, and there are currents in there, and you can learn to masterfully sail and get to any place you wish to go, and direct the experience to a large degree, but that does never make you the master of the ocean. And they're very different things. And so I think that you can kind of see the parallel, but of what we're talking about is that in this process of like learning the I Ching or learning this kind of mystery work, you begin to realize that there are flows of forces, and there are fundamental ones, like the ones he was talking about with the yin and yang. In the Kybalion, I don't know if you've ever read that, Ramon, but I'm pretty sure you probably have. They talk about some basic laws of reality. The Kybalion is a Western metaphysical tradition. It's probably one of the greatest contributions of the modern or more modern era and into metaphysics. And in there, they talk about the law of polarity, and that's really what we're talking about in yin and yang here. We're talking about the law of polarity. And
that's exactly right. Yeah,
it's one of the fundamental laws of reality. And
there's no potential without there's no energy without a difference of potential.
Exactly.
That's right.
In the universe, anywhere, like that's how it works, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And then once you get there, once you start with the polarity, then you realize that there's a natural evolution of that is cyclical motion and rhythm. Right.
Yes. So, man, Jeff is exactly describing. So in the pre-heaven arrangement, the fire trigram, which corresponds to the polarity because it represents enlightenment, it represents electricity itself, precedes directly the lake trigram, which represents resonance and harmony, because it's really, of all the 8 fundamental laws of the universe, I mean, they're all one, but we divide them up.
Can you elaborate on trigram?
Yeah, I will just in a second. But I just want to say, like, that's the only one that we really, quote, need to know is the resonance one. It's so fundamental, and people, they've not been given it. It's not in part of their toolbox when they leave high school. It's just not.
Right.
It's even their whole marriage. They're going without, and they're wondering why people are growing further apart, and why their kids aren't getting along. And I'm sitting here going, the law of resonance. The law of resonance is trying to teach you something. So pay attention, because after that one goes back to heaven again, and then you're back to karma. So the trigram just means the 3 lines, three lines, either solid or broken, put together. That's what that
represent the various strata of the polarity energies and how they're interfacing.
Exactly, on all 3 dimensions of spirit, mind, body, or this kind of pancake experience that we're having. I like to say it's like a pancake because it's made of individual parts, but you can't pull it apart, right? Once it's made, you can't pull the pancake back apart into its parts. So we experience it like it's a single thing, but it is helpful to understand the different layer. And of course, when we're talking about the 2 and 3, right? The polarity and the 3-phase experience that we're having, that those are they're high chakra, but they're not the highest chakra levels. And they're not the lowest in our body. So it's a very important level, because we're talking in the heart and in the throat level. So having the truth and speaking your truth is all going to be related to how well are you handling the yin and yang forces around you. Because there's a time to be hard and tough and disciplined and even pokey at people, and then there's a time to be soft and accepting and moving along, adapting, flowing with things. The interaction of fire and water, however you want to say it, there is this sort of intimate contact of 2 things that have so many complex interactions. You would think that it was all straightforward, yin wants yang. It's not exactly how it works. It's so many more layers to that, and it's been shown in Careaga photography, and it's been shown in physics. It's been shown all over the place.
I got a question for you. Backing up a little bit.
Okay, no problem.
We know from a physics standpoint that anytime you measure something, you change it. Okay.
Yeah.
So this, where you start talking about having sensors and things that you're measuring chi. What is your stance on that? Because technically speaking, if we created a sensor to measure chi, we're changing it.
Yeah.
Maybe slightly, extremely slightly, possibly, passively even, but we are changing it, right?
Well, I'm going to say something that some of your viewers are going to vehemently disagree with, but in medicine, in Eastern medicine, there is no placebo. Everything is part of the medicine perspective. Now, you could take something like honey, and it could be totally inappropriate. And I have a case if you want to hear of that, but it can be incredibly dangerous to use a good thing at the wrong time. And it can be something terrible like venom at the right time. You can have miraculous results. And so, and when we talk about affecting the experience of the healing, first of all, the presence is the most important thing, like the mental presence, because that relationship with the patient is so important. But also, you are hoping that just by even measuring that the act of measuring their energy will actually be part of the healing process. From the moment they walk in the door and you start seeing what kind of clothes they're wearing, what frequencies they're on, how's their hair, what's their handwriting,
Yeah,
when
man,
they
that's so
write when they
true.
write on the
Yep.
form, is it coherent or is it jaggedy, and can they afford their treatments, or are they struggling to make their financial health work, because the financial health is part of the 5-layer wheel. So all of that is actually part of the medicine, as far as when we're talking about this high level way of looking at medicine.
Yeah, it's truly holistic in the sense of it's whole, it's complete. It leaves nothing out. It's interesting. My take on your question, Matt, is that through the life of my practice and working with Jungi medicine, one of the things that I became very aware of, as I really began to viscerally experience the chi, the state of change that was really happening, where things were awry and where they were not with patients, I began to realize one of the statements that one of my early teachers said to me was that it was very rare to encounter an honest deficiency. That usually the problem was that there was a lack of flow. If we are in fact all processes unfolding, and we are made up of processes that are unfolding, then any disharmony has to be an inappropriate unfolding pattern.
Yeah, I would agree with that. That your master was right on.
I totally I personally have never encountered an honest deficiency where there just was not enough, well, for lack of a better term, of the Tao present.
Yeah.
Instead, what was happening was there was a constriction or a blockage or a wall, even in some cases, put up at some level in the being, in the person, in the unfolding experience. And it can happen at any level. I've encountered people that they are not personally even responsible for the origins of the pattern. It was
Right.
passed to them through their lineage, through karma, through the family karma, through spiritual unfolding, through their interaction, through sexual interaction with another human being.
Yep.
It's every layer of being can impart these patterns of energy.
The thing that Matt is gonna, and I'm sure his audience too is going to struggle to understand, is that at this level of what we're talking about, Matt, we're talking about when you see a problem, the most important thing is not actually the treatment. The most important thing is that you correctly identify where it came from. Because there's toxin. You could take the word "do," which means toxin, and that could mean a lot of things. It could mean radiation. It could mean chemicals. It could mean literally like they got stung by a bee.
Right.
I had a patient, she got stung in the back and she had this full body pain, and it really when we finally did the treatment, and what came out was a chemical smell of a chemical that she'd been exposed to. And I'm sure, I think I remember it was correctly, it was a cosmetic, and so it was like suntan lotion. And I came in the room and the whole room was full of the smell of suntan lotion. And she hadn't been to the beach in a while. And what it was is she had been one of those tanning bed people. So when she was stung, the wasp sting set off a whole shingles reaction. But actually, the energy signature was what we call dew, is this poison. And Jeff's he's going super high level, because he's talking about when you look at the person and they're presenting something, you have to decide whether they're even if they have, this is going to sound really terrible, but whether they have the ability to see through something called dukkha, which is delusion, to where you can explain to them at which stage this came from, because it may have actually come from a previous behavior that they did not engage in this life, or that they didn't engage in it in a previous life, but somebody in the family engaged in it. Like, for example, my family, there's a male lineage family curse, but it wasn't any of the males who have suffered from it. Like, we didn't do it, and we probably weren't even part of the family, but we've inherited that energy signature through the Careaga family name.
Well,
and so unlocking that is a really subtle part of the physics, the Chinese physics, that we haven't even begun to touch in the West.
I think we're already saying in Western medicine now that traumatic events gets passed through the DNA.
Yes, the epigenes. Yeah.
So there's
we
go ahead.
We tend to in the West tend to look at things, and we look like at the okay, well, this extreme thing, this extreme trauma, that's passed through in the DNA. But the reality is, Matt, it all is.
Oh, I'm not arguing that at all.
Oh,
I agree. If we can measure something big that happens, once we understand how to measure it, then it starts going back through fine tuning and refinement. And Jeff, you may be absolutely right. I don't know. If fear of something, like almost drowning, can give your children a fear of water, an unfounded weird fear of water because it gets passed through the DNA, tell me why anything else can't get passed through the DNA.
Right.
Maybe at a more subtle level, but that doesn't mean this means we can't measure it yet. And
it may even be beyond DNA. Is the point I think Jeff is trying to also make, is that there's a quantum
entanglement.
When you do Fa Qi. Okay, the patient lays in front of you. Okay, I have a case. Here's a case. So this man has anhydrosis. He cannot sweat. And so I'm doing acupuncture. He went and had a 3-hour MRI, and that must have been incredibly miserable. They couldn't find anything wrong with this guy. He's got some cysts, but he's very healthy physically. So I can see with my third eye there's some energy signature of dryness. But finally, we get around to doing Tuina, which is the massage. And I'm towards the end of the treatment. I'm going down the front of the leg now, and I'm almost done. And I'm on the liver channel, and he starts talking about having me come out and do the feng shui for their home. As it turns out, he was embedded in a feud with every neighbor, and their lawsuits. They're all suing each other over this building that he had constructed, and there was a lot of betrayal. This anger came out, and what actually came out, it was this quantum energy. I pulled it into my body, and then I showed him the face, and he said, "Oh, that's the woman." So he actually could see her signature of anger. That was, it's not her fault that it's in him, but there's a thought form that is attaching there. It's not a ghost, and it's not just pure anger. It's actually something quantum entangled, and it's stored somewhere in the body, but it's not stored in a body that we can see. As far as we know, it's not stored exactly there. Could it be one of the things that causes cancer? Possibly, because the people lock away so many things inside themselves, in the breast and the colon and the testicles and the uterus. And we haven't even explored the possibility that these energies we need a little like Ghostbusters readers that you can go around and you can go, beep, beep, and you can show a Geiger counter for my device that I want to build would have to be the size of a pod, but we need to get to the point where we can actually, practically get to that. And then maybe, who knows, maybe we will have a Google Glass that shows the person's glowing blue today, or they're glowing red, stay away, or they have a cloud over them. Because you meet a person and they have that shadow or that cloud. You know it inside you because you are a measurement device. But creating a physical machine to do that is a whole new bag of apples here. It's a whole new thing that we haven't been contemplated.
What's so amazing to me and so awesome. It's one of the coolest things about just talking with other people that kind of are willing to go down these roads and just explore it in their own way and have a great intellect and can, both unbelievable courage to just look into the face of the unknown and just go, ooh, what's out there? And then the mind to just dive in and just figure out ways to get there. is that we come at it from totally different sides, and yet we're saying the exact same things, and see things in so many. So it's really, we see things the same. But we come at it differently. For me, you're interested in creating this pod for people. You know what I want to do? I want to teach people how to see it. We all have this dreaming capacity. We have the capacity in us. We have a dreaming consciousness. We have a reasoning consciousness, and the two oftentimes don't ever talk to each other. But boy, they can learn to, and they can actually learn to operate simultaneously. And when they do that, that's when you start looking at, you look at the guy, and you don't need Google Glass because you see the cloud.
Yeah, it would be amazing to have, our education is so lacking in wisdom, teaching, and just, we should already, with Western science, be, basically scanning or filtering with these kids to figure out the ones that need therapy and that they're heading down a road that we know is going to end up in a bad place for society and for that kid. And then we won't tolerate it. It's like they turn 18 and now it's not cute anymore. You're just an angry man, and now you're going to go to jail. And what we should have been doing is identifying that at age 5, 6, 7, or 13. And when by the time they're going to juvie all the time, we should have protocols in place for putting them through a series of a battery of things. At this point, we don't have any way of saying it's all their fault or it's all the parents' fault, because we're sharing this lack of compassion. Because we have come through so many cataclysms, we just don't have the compassion built back up yet that may have existed in the Atlantean period. We don't know, but we aren't approaching it in a way that's so loving. I mean, there's people out there that they absolutely hate pit bulls, all because pit bulls have high testosterone. It's so unreasonable. If the pit bull is aggressive, first try to eliminate the testosterone level and see if that corrects the behavior, and also look at the parent or the owners, the parents. How are they behaving? Because one thing Cesar Millan taught me is the anxiety in the owner will be extended to the pet, and I imagine that happens to children to 100th more degree.
Oh, you would imagine, absolutely.
And we're so dangerous. I mean, humans are much more dangerous than dogs. So it's something we actually have a moral mandate to figure out how to commune with energy on a greater level than let's burn some oil or have Wi-Fi signal. Because I mean, Wi-Fi signal, that's just the beginning, of what we can do with electromagnetism. It's so much more.
I did a stint where I sold instruments, optical instruments that measure furnaces and temperature, like really extremely high temperatures, thousands of degrees. Okay. And it was funny for me to be walking into these facilities that had been melting glass and steel and things like that, the same. Because you think about it, these industries are almost the exact same that they were. They're just bigger versions of a blacksmith and a billows. Okay. So and a lot of people don't know that. Same with making electricity. We're still making electricity basically the same way today as when we do it we do it more efficiently, but even that is negligible when you would think we should be a lot further along, right? Yeah. So I walked into a plant one time and measured a glass furnace, and just made like a video, a loop, 5 minutes, and I left it with the engineer. Okay, these guys buy these instruments and stuff for their furnaces, and they wanted to do a test, and he told me after the fact that when they actually reviewed that video, now this is a furnace that's been sitting in their plant for 30 plus years. Okay, these things have 20-year life cycles. Okay, 12 to 20 years on the furnaces, right? So people have been looking at this thing every day for decades. But when they finally looked at it through a thermal imager, they realized that they were overfilling this thing by a bunch, by like 25%. And they were able to cut that back, and it reduced their fuel. I mean, they're saving like $500,000 now in natural gas. Mm-hmm. Okay, so this is the world in the industrial world that we live in, where everybody wants you to come in and measure their stuff any way you can. Like they're looking for brand new ways to get better. But in medicine, right, we don't see that, or we haven't seen that, where we want to look at people through different mediums and different types of instrumentation, right? It doesn't, there's like a stagnation there. That's or a lag maybe. But I can tell you, man, if you pull this off, right, or when you pull this off, because I'm Gemini, that validation would be tectonic. Because if you can measure it, if you can measure it and it's repeatable, holy shit, man! Now you've got, you know what I mean? Now you've got someone's attention.
Yeah,
that would be so what kind of Jeff's saying too, because that would just validate. That would validate Eastern medicine. It'd be a way to validate Eastern medicine on a level that has yet to be experienced, right?
Yeah, that's the goal. I hope people read it and actually go forward and they try the trials out themselves. It's actually not that hard to do. Of course, I would teach anybody who wanted to do a trial to how to help me validate these results, because between the 3 trials that I did, I totally validated Chinese medicine. I was within 0.24 ordinance, so like, of 0 to 10, like you're going by 1, 2, 3, like that. I was in 0.24. Each trial were standard deviation. So the results, as far as getting pain and significance relief, were incredibly in line with each other. So we know that Chinese medicine and other things like Ayurveda and massage, that they are effective. Otherwise, they wouldn't be around so long. What we need help is showing why they're effective, and the true why, of course, not like the the ethnocentrized way of understanding it and going, well, LI4 is the radial pathway, and that's not how that really is working, and that's not how we're looking at it. Let's try and bring some Western physics in and look at what else could be possibly going on. I mean, that's the hope, at least. I certainly look forward to bringing it to the market one day and making a difference, because that is my vision. And like Jeff, I share the goal of teaching people when they're working in the clinic in these pods and they're bringing them out, they're doing Fa Qi themselves. They're measuring, because the Qi is different. It's not like it all feels the same. You move your hand over here and it feels like there's a hole, and over here it feels like there's somebody blowing on your hand, and over here their knee is cold and it feels old. And then you look at their hands, and their hands are older from their wrists to their fingertips. So there's a whole different layer of things that can't be done by machine that have to be done. And we're heading in a direction where we're like, the doctors are like, I don't want to touch the people. I want to read off of a list of numbers and just throw a pharmaceutical at them.
Yeah,
and that's
then
not
see
the
what
direction.
happens, right?
Yeah,
Yep.
and then people aren't happy. They're not happy. I've got a follow-up research that I'll be publishing that has to do with supplements. I took 1,400 cases, I think there's 1,040 cases, and we looked at their self-reporting of supplements and medications. And well, wouldn't you be shocked to know that there is a correlation between how many complaints people have and how many supplements and pharmaceuticals they're taking?
That's
There's a huge spike actually at when you start taking 7 of either or 8 of both together. There's a huge spike in the amount of complaints you have about your health and life. So this is stuff that we need to really move forward in life.
No, definitely. I know we're
pushing on time, aren't we?
We blasted right through. We gotta cut everybody loose. Can we do this again, guys? This was freaking amazing, gentlemen. Amazing. Thank you so much.
Jeff has got the smoothest voice in history, so I can listen to him for another hour.
What's funny is over the last, 4 or 5 years, I've been kicking around. I like to find new ways to bring income in. I get bored easily. And, I do the same, I do the stuff I always do and all that, but I always like to find new stuff. So I engage in art or music or whatever, and I just find a way to get it to pay me a little bit, just to believe that, just because, we live in America and you got to live off of, you got to find ways to make money work. But anyways, for a number of years now, I've been playing around. I've been like, I wouldn't mind doing some voiceover work and voice acting, because I've been told most of my life that I've got a really great voice for it. So who knows? Maybe these podcasts, man, will be some stuff I use.
I got to tell you, I got a good friend of mine, James Lack. Yeah. Shout out. I've been trying to talk him into coming on the show. He is a professional voice actor. So I actually
get him on the show, and I would love to talk with him with you.
Yeah, I'll see what I can do. He listens to these, so maybe we can guilt him into coming on.
Awesome, let's do it.
All right, guys, you guys are amazing. So let's wrap up there. We'll get another part 3, I guess, or part 2 to this going at some point here, schedules permitting.
But I can tell you right now, we haven't. Jeff and I, we opened a couple of really deep gates there.
Yeah.
We're gonna open some real treasure chests. I promise you.
I love it
yeah.
because when I can do these kind of podcasts, when I can sit here with my mic volume just turned off for 90% of the show, I know I'm capturing gold. So you guys have been amazing. So thank you so much. Awesome stuff. So we'll wrap up there, folks. Check us out, noshitcast.com for links to where you consume podcast media. Thanks for all the likes and shares. Thank you, gentlemen, for being on the show, and we'll catch everybody next time. Bye, Sickles.